Have you got the answer? Tell us more about PMQs. I'm sure the Prime Minister knows the answer. Prime Minister. You can't do it. What I'm going to do, I'm going to try and come back. I'm going to go to Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, it was reported this week, including in the Daily Mail, the BBC and ITV, backed up by numerous sources, that at the end of October, the Prime Minister said he would rather have, and I quote, bodies pile high than implement another lockdown. Can the Prime Minister tell the House categorically, yes or no, did he make those remarks or remarks to that effect?
Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker, and I think the right honourable gentleman is a lawyer, I'm given to understand. I think that if he's going to repeat allegations like that, he should come to this House and substantiate those allegations and say where he heard them and who exactly is supposed to have said those. Who exactly is supposed to have said those things, Mr. Speaker? Because I certainly can tell him. And he asked about the October decisions. They were very bitter, very difficult decisions, as they would be for any Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, because no one wants to put this country into a lockdown with all the consequences that means for loss of education, for the damage.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God, stop fucking lying.
This stage in the pandemic, where we find ourselves rolling out choice.
Yes, Starmer.
Well, somebody here isn't telling the truth. The House will have heard the Prime Minister's answer, and I remind him the Ministerial Code says, and I quote, ministers who knowingly mislead Parliament will be expected to offer their resignation. I'll leave it there for now. Turning to another issue, there'll be further on this, believe you me, who initially, and Prime Minister, initially is the key word here, who initially paid for the redecoration of his Downing Street flat?
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to misleading Parliament, you may recollect that it was only a few weeks ago that he said that he didn't oppose this government, this country staying in the leaving the European Medicines Agency. The fact that he was then forced to retract and leaving the European Medicines Agency was absolutely invaluable for our vaccine rollout. And actually, it was just last week that he said that James Dyson was a personal friend of mine. A fact that James Dyson was corrected in the newspaper this morning. As for the
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God, stop fucking lying.
I contrast it, and any further declaration that I have to make, I will.
Always lying to me. You're lying so much.
To make their own decisions in just 8 days' time. Because on average, Labour councils charge you £93
every time you tell me something, I figure that you're lying.
Charge you
It's almost
£125.
like
That, I think, is the issue. That, I think, is the issue upon which the British people would like him to focus.
But you sound excited.
Mr. Speaker, normally when people don't want to incriminate themselves, they go no comment. Let me ask this. Let's explore this a bit further, Prime Minister. Let's ask it a different way. Either, this is the initial invoice, Prime Minister, initial invoice, either the taxpayer paid the initial invoice, or it was the Conservative Party, or it was a private donor, or it was the Prime Minister. So I'm making it easy for the Prime Minister. It's now multiple choice. There are only 4 options. It should be easier than finding the chatty rat, Mr. Speaker. So I ask the Prime Minister again, who paid the initial invoice, Prime Minister, for the redecoration of the Prime Minister's flat, the initial invoice?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've given him the answer, and the answer is I have covered the costs, and I think most people will find it absolutely bizarre. And of course, there's an electoral commission investigating this, and I can tell him that I've conformed in full with the code of conduct, with ministers' ministerial code, and officials have been kept victimising me throughout this whole thing.
Now,
But I
girl, I
think
know
it's
you
absolutely
pimpin'.
bizarre
Do you know you
that he
can't
is
help
focusing on this issue,
You know
where what
what I
people want to know is what plans the Labour government might have
Why
to
the
improve
fuck
the
you
life of people in this country.
Why
And let me
you
tell you, if he talks
always
about housing
lying?
again, we're helping
my
people
God.
on the house. I'd rather not spend taxpayers' money, by the way, like the last Labour government spent £500,000 on taxpayers' money on the Downing Street. I'd rather, I would, yes they did, target up. I would much rather help people get on the property ladder, and it's this Conservative government that has built 244,000 homes in the last year, which is a record over 30 years. It is this government that gets on with delivering on the people's priorities while he continually raises, I think, issues that most people would find irrelevant to their concerns.
Mr. Speaker, he talks of priorities. What's he spending his time doing? This is a Prime Minister who, during the pandemic, was nipping out of meetings to choose wallpaper at £840 a roll. Just last week, he spent his time phoning journalists to moan about his old friend Dominic Cummings. And he's telling the civil service to find out who paid for the redecoration in his flat. The Cabinet Secretary has been asked to investigate who paid for the refurbishments in the flat. Why doesn't the Prime Minister just tell him? That would be the end of the investigation. Mr. Speaker, it's been widely reported that Lord Brownlow, who just happens to have been given a peerage by the Conservative Party, was asked to donate £58,000 to help repay for the cost of this refurbishment. Can the Prime Minister, if he's so keen to answer, confirm, did Lord Brownlow make that payment for that purpose?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think I've answered this question several times now, and the answer is that I have covered the costs. I have met the requirements that I've been advised to meet in full, and when it comes to the taxpayer and the costs of number 10 Downing Street, the previous Labour government, Tony Blair, racked up a bill of £350,000. And I think what the people of this country want to see is minimising taxpayers.
So how much keep
on their knees and delivering more homes for the people of this country.
Why you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God! Stop fucking lying!
Answer the question. That's what the public scream at their televisions every PMQs. Answer the question. The Prime Minister hasn't answered the question. He knows he hasn't answered the question. He never answers the question. The Prime Minister will be aware that he's required to declare any benefits that relate to his political activities, including loans or credit arrangements, within 28 days. 28 days, Prime Minister, yes. He will also know that any donation must be recorded in the register of ministers' interests, and that under the law, any donation of over £500 to a political party must be registered and declared. So the rules are very clear. The Electoral Commission now think that there are reasonable grounds to suspect that an offence or offences may have occurred. That's incredibly serious. Can the Prime Minister tell the House, does he believe that any rules or laws have been broken in relation to the refurbishment of the Prime Minister's flat?
Prime Minister.
No, I don't, Mr. Speaker. What I believe has been strained to breaking point is the credulity of the public. He has half an hour every week to put serious and sensible questions to me about the state of the pandemic, about the vaccine rollout, about what we're doing to support our NHS, about what we're doing to fight crime, about what we're doing to fight back from this pandemic.
Why you always lying? Oh my God! Stop fucking lying! Always lying to me.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, can I remind the Prime Minister of the Nolan Principles, which are meant to govern the behaviour of those in public office? They're these: selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership. Instead, what do we get from this Prime Minister and this Conservative government? Dodgy contracts, jobs for their mates, and cash for access. And who's at the heart of it? The Prime Minister, Major Sleaze, sitting there. Mr. Speaker, meanwhile, he talks about priorities. Crime is going up. NHS waiting lists are at record levels, and millions of people are worried about their jobs, including Liberty Steel. Mr. Speaker, don't the British people deserve a Prime Minister they can trust and a government that isn't mired in sleaze, cronyism and scandal?
Mr. Speaker, last week he came to this chamber and he attacked me for talking to James Dyson about ventilators, where we're now sending ventilators to help the people of India, and the following day,
Lying so much,
the Labour front bench said that
making it hard for me.
the same thing.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Wasting oh my god, stop fucking lying. Always lying to me. Lying so much, I know it's not making it hard for me. We gonna ride it on this one real slow.
Let's
keep on lying.
Mr. Speaker,
Damn.
the serious sexual and violent criminals, which he opposed.
Peace.
Mr. Speaker, we're getting on. And by the way, I forgot to mention it.
Let's go to the leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford. Ian.
Mr. Speaker, over 127,000 people have died from COVID in the United Kingdom. People have lost their mothers and fathers, their grandparents and even their children. NHS staff have given their all, fighting to keep people alive. That's why so many people find the Prime Minister's remark that he would rather let their bodies pile high in their thousands than go into lockdown utterly sickening. The BBC and ITV have multiple sources confirming that this is what the Prime Minister said. People are willing to go under oath, Mr. Speaker, confirming that the Prime Minister said these exact words, under oath, Mr. Speaker. Now, parliamentary rules stop me from saying that the Prime Minister has repeatedly lied to the public over the last week. But can I ask the question, are you a liar, Prime Minister?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I leave it to you to judge whether the right honourable gentleman's remarks were in order. But what I will say to him is that...
Say, unfortunately, we're in order, but we're not savoury and not what we would expect.
I'm grateful to you, Mr. Speaker. But what I would say to the right honourable gentleman is that if he is going to relay that kind of quotation, it is up to him in a place like Parliament to produce the author, the person who claims to have heard it. Because I can't find them. He says that they're willing to go on oath. Perhaps they're sitting somewhere in this building. I rather doubt it. Because I didn't say those words. What I do
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my god, stop fucking lying.
To protect them from disease, and he's right to draw attention to the wretched toll that COVID has brought. And we grieve. I know the whole House grieves for every